to officially open the conference. So Dr. David Njibamum is the chairperson of the SCA Germany, and he works for the European Patent Office. He has been very, very active in the German community of Southern Cameroonians and also beyond in several efforts aimed at bringing lasting peace to the dignified people of the Southern Cameroons. Dr. Njibamum, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Mufo. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, no matter the time you are watching us. My name is David Njibamum, the current chairman of SCA Germany. Dear invitees, fellow members of the Southern Cameroons Association Germany, dear members of the Southern Cameroons International Town Hall, everybody watching us over SCVC or digital platforms. On behalf of our association, I wish to express warm welcome to this second edition of our virtual conference on the Southern Cameroons. Specifically, I would like to welcome our panelists. We have Professor Carlson Anyangwe, who is joining us from South Africa. Professor Anyangwe, you are welcome to the panel. We have Professor P.L.O. Lumumba joining us all the way from Kenya. I think the name alone says all and does not need further introduction at this stage. Professor P.L.O. Lumumba, you are welcome to the panel.
Thank you very much.
Then we have Dr. Edmund Forlefac joining us from Colombo, Ohio, the United States of America. Dr. Forlefac, welcome to the panel. You're muted, let's see. We have Mr. Vincent Hendrickx. Mr. Hendrickx is the regional manager of Miserio for Chad, the Republic of Cameroon, and Central African Republic. Miserio is a Catholic mission organization committed to providing protection, help to self-help, and prospect for life and dignity. Mr. Hendrickx, you are welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
I thank you panelists for accepting our invitation to share your knowledge and experience with all those who are interested in achieving lasting peace in the Southern Cameroons. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of some of the panelists from our last conference who are also present with us. We have Reverend Mrs. Dorothea Holz-Apfel, pastor at Evangelic Church Community in Reichenbach, Hopfeld. We have Reverend Johannes Stahl, pastor at the Worldwide Church of Partnership Coordinator in Basel Mission, the German branch for Cameroon, Nigeria, and Sudan. He's also present with us today.
Very much welcome. Happy to be here with you.
We have Dr. Yuvan Yerima, who was a panelist last time. He's a senior energy engineer, and a very active member of SCA Germany. He's still present with us.
I also want to greet all of you.
So thank you. I'm listening. Thank you very much, Jibramo. All right.
I don't know, I've not seen him. We also have Dr. Volker Riev, also from Miserio, Berlin. who is responsible for contacts to the German Parliament and government in development policy. So we have heard from Dr. Mofo, who is the founding chairman of Southern Cameroons Association Germany. He will be moderating this conference today. Dr. Mofo is principal manager of space programs at Collins Aerospace in Germany. Dr. Mofo, thank you for accepting to coordinate this event. I would like to give special thanks to the SCVC team, who is doing a lot to make us be able to communicate here today and make people in the worldwide to be able to be part of this event today. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say a few words about our association, the Southern Cameroons Association Germany, who is organizing this conference. The Southern Cameroons Association Germany, abbreviated SCA, is an umbrella association of Southern Cameroonian groupings in Germany. This association evolved from the former Southern Cameroons Community Germany, abbreviated SCCG, after internal reorganization in 2020. The main objective of SCA Germany is to bring Southern Cameroonians in Germany together to achieve unity of purpose on a global scale, to seek lasting solutions to the Southern Cameroons situation, which is now characterized by a full-blown war. Our activities are guided by three pillars: unity, humanity, and advocacy. Ladies and gentlemen, a situation that started with corporate demonstrations, started by common law lawyers and teachers in 2016, has become a full-blown war. Children have not been able to go to school peacefully in the past 5 years, and there is no indication that this is going to change any soon. Kidnapping of civilians for ransom is rampant, and no one can say without reasonable doubt who the perpetrators are. This is an indication that the government of the Republic of Cameroon has lost control over the situation in Southern Cameroons and can no longer safeguard peace, safety, security, and the constitutional rights of all citizens in the Southern Cameroons. It is therefore imperative that we step up our efforts to look for ways to end this 5 years ongoing war, which has brought untold sufferings to the civilian population before it further degenerates to consume the entire Gulf of Guinea. Our borders were carved by colonial masters without regard of deep-rooted historic, cultural, and linguistic bonds between people. The question of sovereignty has to be secondary when human rights are at stake. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, and justice delayed is justice denied. The people of Southern Cameroons deserve to enjoy peace and justice in a similar way as the citizens of every other nation. We are aware that we cannot provide a political solution to this historic problem, but we do hope that we shall be able to arrive at some solution, or at least proposals that can lead to the stop of this war before a lasting political solution can be arrived at. Once again, I thank you all for respecting our invitation and taking the time to join us today. Look for lasting peace in the Southern Cameroons. We look forward for constructive discussions today. So I thank you very much for coming to be with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Njibamum, for this welcome address. Thank you. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen? Hello?
Yes, we can see your screen.
If you are seeing my screen, I guess you can see SCA Conference 2022. And the title, The Neglected War in the Southern Cameroons. Just some general information, how we are going to run the conference. We already have the welcome and the introduction of the conference from the chairperson of SCA Germany, Dr. David Njibamum. The next presentation after his will be on the war itself. How did it happen? Why is there a war in the Southern Cameroons? And this will be handled by Professor Carlson Anyangwe. Then we will look at the consequences of the war. There will be two components in this presentation. The first of which would focus on the socio-political consequences, looking at some facts and figures. And these will be handled by Dr. Edmund Forlefac. And then there will be a second part which would focus on the geopolitical and even geostrategic aspects of the conflict. And this will be handled by Professor PLO Lumumba. And then the fourth part will be how can we put an end to this war? This will be handled by Mr. Vincent Hendrickx. So they have been introduced already. And at the end, we would discuss on how we can enhance action, how we can achieve enhanced action to put an end to this war. So after each presentation, there will be room for 1 or 2 questions maximum because of the time constraints that we have. But at the end of the presentations, we will find room for additional questions and general discussions that should hopefully lead us to some resolutions today. We have noted that some participants have difficulty coming into the conference. So those who go to register, I'm sure they can still receive an email if they go on here to register, they will receive an email. And when they go there directly, they will be asked to join the webinar directly. Then you can click the option to join the ongoing webinar. And as mentioned already, this conference is being broadcast on the TV of the Southern Cameroons Broadcasting Corporation, abbreviated SCBC. Very, very important also for those who would have been attending the Southern Cameroons Town Hall, National Town Hall, in a few minutes. That space will be covered by this ongoing conference. This Southern Cameroons International Town Hall is a very important forum where we can get ourselves updated on the current situation in the Southern Cameroons about the conflict. And so we call on participants here also to keep this in mind. It is an avenue where you can ask pertinent questions and raise suggestions about the conflict which is going on. There will be some key topics today. This conference, the meeting will start not at the normal time, 4 p.m., but it will be from 6 p.m. Central European time, or 6 p.m. in the Southern Cameroons, 12 noon, right up to 17:00 Eastern time, USA and Canada, and it will be from 1700 to 2200, London, Liberia, and Ghana. So please take note, and also particularly to members of the SCA Germany, the topics there today are quite interesting and important for us, and also members of the Amazonian Professional Association. Please go there to participate today. Now we are going to call the first panelist for the first topic: what is actually the cause of this war in the southern Cameroons? And so we are calling on Professor Carlson Anyangwe, who is here present already. Let me say a few words about Professor Anyangwe. So Professor Carlson Anyangwe is a legal scholar and activist whose works account in fact and in law the historical truths in the liberation struggle of Anglophone Cameroonians. His profound knowledge of this history and his expertise in the field of international law provide for some new insights in the annexation of the Southern Cameroons. Professor Anyangwe, please, you have the floor. Thank you once more for coming.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mofo. Let me first begin by thanking the organizers of this webinar, timely, and I must say that it is my pleasure to be able to share this platform here with my friends and brothers, Professor Lumumba, Hendrickx, and Dr. Forlefac. I hope we'll see as the day goes on. I'm told that time is very limited, and I have a very limited time to talk. So I'll just do two things. The first thing I'll do is to engage attention around those two things. First, what the war in Ambazonia is all about, because I don't think we've articulated that so far very well for everybody to understand, and also the toll that that war has taken. And the second thing I want to just talk about is my contention that the neglect of this war is in part due to a terminological morass surrounding the war itself and surrounding our cause. On the issue of the war and its toll, the first thing, of course, is characterization of this war. This war is about the Ambazonian question. The Ambazonian question is the issue of decolonization from Cameroon colonial annexation, spoliation, armed occupation, and genocide. The struggle of the people of Ambazonia is a decolonization struggle, like all hitherto decolonization struggles in Africa. It is not a separatist struggle. It is not a secessionist struggle. Fighting to eliminate colonialism is not secession. Fighting to ward off colonial occupation is not separation. It cannot be characterized as such. It cannot be taken as setting a secessionist precedent in Africa or anywhere else in the world. The Ambazonian decolonization question seeks to bring colonialism in Ambazonia to an end. It seeks to promote human rights and the international rule of law, as well as to vindicate the right of self-determination. So the Ambazonian question, we must get that very clear, has nothing to do with secession or separation, as some inattentive minds often rush to characterize it. It is about a people struggling to free themselves from French-assisted Cameroon colonialism and armed occupation. It has nothing to do with Cameroon's sympathy and favor-seeking rhetoric about so-called terrorism, secession, or separation. Cameroon is a colonial state in relation to Ambazonia. And since 1972, there is no consensual entity in existence from which it can be said Ambazonia is attempting to withdraw. That there's no such entity. Colonialism, whether it is white or it is black or it is blue or green or whatever, is anathema. It is dated and universally rejected. And so the people of Ambazonia will not suffer colonialism under any guise to be forced down their throats. They will never become slaves of Cameroon. And so what is happening? Ambazonia is fighting a defensive anti-colonial war to be free from colonial bondage, from colonial depredation, from colonial oppression, from colonial exploitation. It is fighting to protect the people and the territory of Ambazonia. It is fighting to protect the history, the very identity and culture of the people of Ambazonia, and the right to be masters of their own destiny. The persistence of this war in Ambazonia for over 5 years already is a function of the deep grievance felt by Ambazonia at being colonized by Cameroon. Cameroon's war aim is to conquer and permanently subjugate the people of Ambazonia in order to steal their homeland and to have unhindered access to its resources. So Cameroon's war is a colonial war, a war without a cause. It is waging a war of naked aggression, an illegal and unjust war. It is war that seeks to grab the territory of Ambazonia, and that Ambazonians will never accept. Ambazonian naked aggression also have, and people have not sometimes noticed it, has elements of a proxy war on behalf of France. What is France doing? France is seeking to dislodge Anglo-Saxon influence and derived culture in the easternmost end of the Gulf of Guinea. It seeks to extend French language and culture, which are matters upon which France is obsessionally attached. Cameroon is conducting an unjust war on economic basis for cultural reasons as dictated by France, the neo-colonial puppeteer. Now, at the turn of this century, France hatched out a strategy to penetrate English-speaking African countries using its infamous France-Afrique outfits as a tool of policy. France began making some inroads into English-speaking countries, Nigeria, Kenya, Zambia, and most recently, South Africa and Ghana. It even applied, and this is so surprising, it even applied for membership of the Southern African Development Community, much to the utter surprise and amusement of members of that regional economic organization. France's excuse is that Réunion, which is off the coast of Madagascar, is a French territory, and therefore it wants to be a member of SADC. But happily, it would seem that China and Russia are now upsetting the French apple cart in Africa. So what are we talking about this toll? This was going 5 years. After 45 years of patience, but fruitless, peaceful efforts, diplomatic contacts, litigation, patient petitioning, deputization, litigation in the African Human Rights Court, litigation in the Human Rights Committee in Geneva, litigation in neighboring countries like Nigeria. After all these efforts came to naught, the people of Ambazonia launched a massive countrywide public protest in 2016, 2017. What were they asking for? They were simply calling for an end to colonization, an end to oppression, an end to intensified Frenchification of Ambazonia, and for a return to 1961-1972 parity federal free association that was agreed upon by the two countries. But characteristically, the protest was met by brutal armed repression. French Cameroon declared war and deployed more of its troops in Ambazonia with orders to shoot and kill just about anyone they choose to. In 2017 alone, hundreds of men, women, and children were assassinated by those foreign troops. That provoked a massive refugee flow into Nigeria and thousands of IDPs. Cameroon's colonial troops went on a rampage. They killed indiscriminately. They burned down homes and villages, which were even being occupied by people inside. They raped and looted. Ambazonia was taken completely unawares. The youth of Ambazonia, the valiant youth of Ambazonia, in their various communities, quickly organized themselves and rose up to the occasion in self-defense groups. They had no weapons, they had no military training, but miraculously, they nevertheless bravely stood up to defend their families and their communities. And they did so, using whatever they could find, they could lay their hands on. Stones, catapults, sticks, machetes, and any rusty hunting rifle they could find. And so began a war that quickly morphed into a defensive Ambazonia war of decolonization, which is now in its 5th year. At the end of 2021, from reliable sources, at least 40,000 civilians have lost their lives in this war. An estimated 200,000 persons have fled to Nigeria and other countries as refugees. 1 million have been made IDPs. At least 4 million people are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. No less than 400 towns and villages and countless homes have been burned down by French Cameroon colonial troops. Hundreds of females have been raped, a good number of them deliberately infected with HIV and other STDs. Scores of children have been murdered in targeted killings. Food and food crops and livestock have been destroyed to impose conditions of famine. Water sources have been defiled. Water sources have been polluted. All this in order to provoke a pestilence. Mass graves punctuate the landscape. Genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity are being perpetrated in Ambazonia by the terrorist colonial state of Cameroon. The occupying colonial forces of that country systematically continues to kill women, teenagers, and even babies, the elderly and the infirm. Education in Ambazonia has been bastardized. Along with 1972 infrastructural and economic developments, education has been rolled back 100 years. The legal and judicial system, the common law system, is now a lamentable shadow of what it used to be before 1972. I must say, Presidents Emmanuel Macron and Paul Biya bear direct and full responsibility for these heinous crimes. 5 years into the decolonization war, both presidents are still dreaming of forcing the territory and people of Ambazonia to be their colony for resource looting and plundering. As I said, this will never happen. France and Cameroon are attempting to pin down Cameroon ambassador as a French sphere of cultural influence and their economic backyard. France seeks to impose on Ambazonia via French Cameroon its evil colonial accord de coopération. It seeks to impose the continued use of France's colonial currency, the Colonie Française d'Afrique, CFA franc. That currency, as everybody knows, is France's key tool of colonial control and economic looting and plundering. Through its shadowy France-Afrique outfit and its esoteric lodges in Francophone Africa. And yet, the English-speaking people and territory of Ambazonia is a country which at no time was ever French colonial rule. The people of Ambazonia continue to strongly reject any idea or suggestion, explicit or implicit, that Ambazonia is or will ever be an area under French influence. Ambazonia does not have and has never had and does not intend to have any ties of any kind, colonial or otherwise, with France. Unfortunately, in this war, even the United Nations Security Council has so far failed to assume its responsibility under Chapter 7 of the Charter of the United Nations to deal with Cameroon's colonial war in Ambazonia. Shockingly also, African states and the Continental Organization, the AU, have turned a blind eye to the genocide and mass destruction being carried out in Ambazonia on the express orders of Mr. Biya. The continuous shouting silence is misguided, I would suggest. It reminds one of the inertness of the Continental Organization during Eritrea's 30 years of independence war and the genocide in Rwanda. One wondered, and I wonder, why the Black race tends to be so callous, insensitive, and indifferent to mass self-destruction of its kind. Second thing I do want to mention is this whole question of the terminological confusion, which actually beclouds our messaging, what we say to the outside world. Arguably, this war has not claimed, focused, and sustained outside attention. When it started, it was breaking news. Episodes of it drew some media attention. Some international actors noted it, and some made some woolly comments, often as a mere aside. Then interest suddenly died out. It died out to the scandalous extent where CAF and some African states just early this month, last month, endorsed the macabre spectacle of football played on the blood and skeletons of Ambazonian genocide victims. The pretense was that politics should be kept out of sports. That ignores the fact that sport competitions are eminently political events and are politically instrumentalized. Consider the sport boycott of Russia as soon as it invaded Ukraine. Nowadays, the war in Ambazonia hardly makes media headlines. The war hardly draws the attention of governments and parliaments. I would suggest that there are a few reasons for this. One, there are those who cynically say the casualty figures have not yet reached the threshold warranting international concern. I must admit they have no idea what that hypothetical bar or limit is. But it is said that our war, the killing, Biya has not killed sufficiently to warrant international concern. Two, there are the uninformed who dismiss the war as simply another episode of Africa's endemic wars to be left to a territorial authority to deal with as they see fit. 3, we have well-meaning personages who have drawn our attention to the fact that there will continue to be significant lack of interest in our cause, so long as we continue with conflicting messaging and so long as we seem unable to present to the outside world a clear, coherent, and consistent articulation of what the war in Ambazuna is all about. 4, there is a body of mischievous persons who self-interestedly characterize our cause and the war. They say it is a secessionist or a separatist enterprise to be treated as an internal matter of quote unquote the concerned state, which they say is entitled to use such force as is necessary to crush the secessionist bid. We ourselves are guilty of offering language confusion to the outside world as regards our cause and our war. In so doing, we unwittingly burden the outside world with the task of trying to figure out things for themselves or for itself. In that context, it simply declines to do so, to assume that burden. Now, consider the following terminologies which we often tend to use. We are the one fighting. We are fighting against an enemy, French Cameroon. I will refer to it as the government. We refer to its colonial troops in Ambazonia as the military, as the forces of law and order. Some of people even refer to and say, oh, our country, Cameroon. Some say Anglophone crisis. Some refer to Northwest, Southwest region of Cameroon. Some are stuck with West Cameroon or Southern Cameroon, and even worse, British Southern Cameroon. Anglophone Cameroon. To compound this confusion, we have in our midst those who advocate federalism, but who are unable to articulate the meaning of the federation they're talking about, the content of the federation they're talking about, and how they intend to protect the federation they're talking about. We also have those in our midst who advocate that we should just accept and live under the imperium of the colonial occupier oppressor. And then we also have opponents who are opposed to the war, and they say we must submit now to a UN-organized referendum as an alternative to the war. But they're unable to provide any specifics as to how, when, and the mechanics of such a referendum that must take place now in their view. So this semantic imbroglio tends to reflect or is reflective of our model thinking regarding our cause. It is also a reflection of indecision on our part as to exactly what we want. We do not seem to realize that there is a very close nexus between language and power. When we use the terminologies of the colonial occupier, we unwittingly betray the fact that our perception of things and the world is colored by the colonizer's perception or perspective. Now, consider what is happening now in the war between Russia and Ukraine. You would have noticed that Russia strongly refuses to concede that it is at war. It says, no, it is not at war. It refuses to admit that it has invaded Ukraine. What does Russia say? It says it is merely carrying out what it calls special operations in Ukraine. It rejects the terms war and invasion. Why? Because those terms connote aggression, illegality, and guilt. Ukraine, for its part, consistently talks of war, invasion, aggression, and occupation. Again, why? Because those terms are censorious and they cast Ukraine in the mold of a victim, the victim of Russian aggression. In our situation, we all know that the colonizer fancifully calls us terrorists. They have been doing that. And that is what all colonial powers have done since the times of colonization. Those fighting for freedom have always been labeled as terrorists. For our part, we rightly designate French Cameroon as a terrorist state. Indeed, it's a terrorist state. Like all colonial powers are terrorist states. It's the vassal state of France that uses systematic torture as an instrument of policy, an aggressor state, a colonial occupier and oppressor. The very appellation Cameroon, however you spell it, because when you speak verbally, some people say you can distinguish between Cameroon with OO, some say you can distinguish without the OU. But when you speak verbally, no one makes that kind of a distinction. So the appellation Cameroon is an exonym. It is a polysemous name. It creates ambiguity when adjoined to each of the compass bearings indicated by, say, West Cameroon, Southern Cameroon, Northwest, Southwest Cameroon. Those bearings misdirect any person unfamiliar with the convoluted history of Ambazonia. In the case of the appellation Anglophone, it at once invites dismissal of the people. They say, well, Anglophones, and you've seen it in the press, they're just a small linguistic minority. Why are they a minority? They're a linguistic minority in a sea of what is presented as 250 tribes and languages. Even when you remind your interlocutor that the territory we are talking about is a separate and distinct former United Nations trust territory, well delimited and demarcated under international boundary treaties, they will simply say, well, but you voted to join them. And that is it. Now, by way of conclusion, let me just say, the war in Ambazonia is a decolonization struggle indistinguishable from previous such struggles in Africa. It is a war about which the conscientious world ought also to actively concern itself in order to bring it to a speedy end. The conscientious world should do so, notwithstanding other contemporaneous wars in Syria, Yemen, and now Ukraine that are making competing demands on its attention, time, and resources. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Anyangwe, for enlightening us that it is about decolonization. Let me ask, first of all, if there is a question to Professor Anyangwe. We have time constraint already since we started late. Is there any question coming from the participants? As of now, I see no question. And if that be the case, then we should be going to the next presenter. There will be.
I think there is one question.
Yes.
There's one question from the panelists to Professor Anyangwe. So I think I just read it. So my question is directed to Professor Anyangwe. The process of decolonization effectively began in 2016. However, the process has been impeded by multiple factions and divided opinions and terminologies as mentioned in your expose. What, in your opinion, is the way forward to fast track the decolonization process? This is from Comrade Valentine Asafo.
Thank you very much. Let me clarify that issue about decolonization. When we talk about it, we go back to 1961. It's true that in 1961, under the auspices of the United Nations, they started a decolonization process of trust territories. And so we offered achieving independence by federating with either Nigeria or French Cameroon. That's the interpretation of the word joining in our context, meant federating. In fact, a free association arrangement. So on the 1st of October, the Southern Cameroon ceased to be a trust territory. The British left. What does that mean? It means that the Southern Cameroon at that moment was no longer a colonial territory, at least not under the United Nations and ruled by the British. We entered a free association arrangement in which we maintained our autonomy on a federal level. That was the agreement that was reached. And Southern Cameroon could have asserted its external sovereignty it wanted. But because it committed to a federation, it suppressed that part and accepted internal sovereignty as a federated state. But in 72, we all know what happened in 72. We lost that independence, that autonomy which we had in 72. That's when our war started. Petitions upon petitions, since then, nothing. Nobody was prepared to hear us. Until when the people decide themselves, 2016, and said, we've had enough of this. This thing must come to an end. And took necessary action, like all colonized people. Because after colonization under the British ended, we immediately in 72 moved on to colonization by a neighboring African country, black on black colonization. What is the way forward? We must continue to insist that we remain a territory that has not yet been decolonized. And this will fall squarely within the agenda of the United Nations. What has obscured our decolonization struggle is the blackness of our neighbor. If that neighbor had been a white country, everybody would have picked it straight away. So that is, we're in a colonial situation. But because it's a black country, people don't tend to see that. But colonization, whether white or black, doesn't make any difference. So that's what we have to insist on, even at level of the United Nations, even at level of the African Union, even at level of the EU, and make that point that they should understand that we're under colonial rule. Let me just end by saying that this is not too far-fetched. You all must have heard about the case which Mauritius instituted in the International Court of Justice against the UK government. Now, the claim was that Mauritius had been decolonized in 1965. That's what they said. British said, oh no, we decolonized in 1965. What did the International Court of Justice examine all the evidence and came out and said, no, you must go back and complete the decolonization of Mauritius. It was never completed. And that's how we have today. Britain has been told to go back. It is trying to waive and so, but in the end, you have to go back and complete that decolonization. The completion of decolonization means the Chagos, which is part of Mauritius, which the British excised and continue to hold it as a British colonial territory, which is called Biot, has to be given back to Mauritius. So I think for me, that's the way forward. We have not insisted on this aspect of decolonization, which is, for me, our way forward. And because we don't insist on it, we jump on the thing and say, oh, we are secessionists, we are separatists, and so on and so forth. And nobody looks at French Cameroon to say, you're a colonial power, you're a colonial country. What are you doing with that territory? So for me, that's the way forward.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Anyangwe. Clear message, we must continue to insist that we are a territory that has not yet been decolonized.
Correct.
Yes, so that is noted. We will have to go to the next presenter because there will still be some room for questions at the end of the presentations, as we said earlier. So Professor Anyangwe mentioned that one of the reasons why this conflict has, let's say, not really gained sufficient attention is because, or apparently, that the casualties have not yet reached the level to warrant international concern.
Yeah,
And
true.
this is what will take us to the next presenter, Dr. Edmund Forlefac. He would be talking about these casualties. He'll be talking about some of the consequences of this war, looking at real facts and figures. So Dr. Edmund Forlefac is a medical oncologist. He's here with us, and he's currently serving at the St. James, Ohio State University Comprehensive Cancer Center. So he began his medical training at the University of Ife in Nigeria before moving to the US to complete his fellowship at Boston University. Now, since this conflict began, Dr. Forlefac has remained very passionate about the situation in the southern Cameroons, and he has been actively involved in analyzing the impact of the ongoing war. He will talk to us about some facts and figures in the ongoing war, and hence socio-political consequences. Dr. Forlefac, you have the floor.
So, yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thanks to the Professor Anyangwe for that wonderful presentation that seamlessly leads me to my part. And thank you to all the listeners, especially those that are not from Amazonia. And I think I'll start by mentioning something Professor Anyangwe said, which is profound. And I tell you where my thought about this, what are my thoughts about why our war has been this neglected. There is a tale of two wars currently. You have the Ukrainian war, and then you have the Amazonian war. The two aggressors are Russia in Ukraine and La République du Cameroun in Cameroon, in the case of Amazonia. Yet, one of the wars has actually garnered international attention to the point where, and even though it's just about less than 10 days old, the other has been going on for about now more than 5 years. And the casualties in that war that has been going on for 5 years, it's actually like in multiple of times higher than the one that has been going on for 10 days. And the attention that has been given over these 5 years to that our war has been like a tiny little fraction. It's like an ounce compared to a ton, if you were to weigh those in some kind of a scale. And the reason in my mind is simple, and that's the premise for which I will present you the data I have. And that is that somehow in the white power structure mind, and that's the white man's civilization in their thought process, it's God created animals and created the human race, which is white, the human beings, which are white. And then in between these animals and the white man, who is the human being in their eyes, there is this gradation of humanoids, or what W.E. Du Bois may call a tertium quid. And that forms these other people, these other humans. And the black man is very close, much closer to the animal than to the human being. And therefore, when war breaks out in southern Cameroons like it is, the normal thing is, all right, yeah, it is the nature of cannibals to eat other animals. Just like it is in the nature of these less than human beings to always be at conflict and kill each other and murder each other. This is them. This is their own. That's their nature. And so why should we care? That there is the reason I have actually sat back and thought, and I believe that that is the case. For all our white friends who really have actually come and lived through that real depraved mindset, we say, we thank you. Like for all, you can never really paint a race with a broad sword. But that's actually the politics of the world. That's what has led to the mutilation of the world. That's what has led to Ambazonia being that neglected. I want to present you the human toll of the Bia's war and the France, as like Professor Anyangwe said again. Bia, like being a vassal state, Bia is also a tool in the hands of Macron and the French power. Actually in Africa, currently killing, plundering our country and foraging wherever they can find. Please, can you move to the next slide, please? So that's the map of Amazonia. And here what you are seeing is this war, as Professor Anyangwe gave some broad swords in terms of broad numbers, 1 million people or more displaced, 4 million people needing food assistance, about 200,000 official refugees, probably by some accounts, more than double that amount in Nigeria. Then, of course, I just wanted to take that and then break that down to really for people to understand that all aspects of the Ambazonian community are being impacted by this, inhumane and genocidal war perpetrated on us by the French La République axis of evil. Here is the map of Ambazonia, 8 million people. Here what you see is the toll on the churches. So I heard about some pastors who are panelists here, and thank you very much for joining us. You have to realize that not even the houses of God, not even the houses of faith, have actually been, the men of God have actually been spared of this carnage. People have been killed in the churches. So over the Ambazonia, you can see that all of those are churches that have been burned or decimated. And from our data, we have about 40-something that have been, decimated or burned down, or people destroyed intentionally. Those are not like somebody sending. Even the Russians actually even send cluster bombs and could say, oh, we just send a cluster bomb. Here is the military targeting this church and killing people either in that or burning the churches, because at the sole crime, these churches are Ambazonian churches. The people attending these churches are Ambazonians. Next slide, please. And in terms of, well, we've said this, and in terms of the number of casualties, Professor Anyangwe was right. When we, the last time that we collected this data, in about 6 months ago, so we're still putting up the most accurate data, there were roughly about 39,236 confirmed deaths. Now, if you factor in the fact that in every war, these are the people that have been killed directly by the assassin's bullet. The Bears human engineered monster that they call an army, who are, as Professor Anyangwe said, are the army of occupiers. Multiply that, you multiply this factor by 3, 4, sometimes even 5 to know the true casualties in terms of the number who have died because they can't go to hospitals, because they don't have food to eat, and for other reasons of deprivation. Then there are more than 2,000 of our comrades across the jails in Ambazonia, some of them in the gulags or the dungeons, jails that were meant to hold about 400 people. Some of them are 5 times capacity. And, the conditions are much worse than any gulag or dungeon that anybody could imagine in any previous war that any human race has fought. If you doubt me, go back to these places and find out for yourself. And we have now over 400,000 children who haven't gone to school now, getting into the 6th year. And if you think about this, that you're blighting the future of this kid when they don't go to school, if you don't have an education, education is what has made people like me, to even be able to sit here and talk. It's there's the rallying, unifying that single thing in the world that everybody knows brings people out of poverty. So that's the number. And we have more than 4,000 documented incidences of rape that have been reported. For some of these women being courageous enough to report them, we know that rape and sexual violence is a tool. It's a tool in addition to armed robbery. These are and intimidation. These are the three most important tools in the arsenal of the La République occupiers. And over 1,500 missing persons. A lot of these people would be in some of the yet to be identified underground prisons. Like we recently found out that there is one in Idinau where a lot of our people are actually taken there, and many of these people are killed and buried there. And we don't even know whether we would ever be able to find them out. Next, please. So next slide. Yeah, next here. So we see here, look, the slide that you just see there is actually looking at the incidences of areas where, so the United Nations, UNICEF estimates that the, close to 255 of the, what we may actually even call 7 rudimentary health facilities before the war have actually been burned down or raided and destroyed by the military. And if you go down to the next slides, I will show you a little bit more data. Here you can see the number of healthcare workers who have been murdered across La République. In blue is the northern zone, and then in red is from the southern zone. And the down, the other table down, you can see, also this same number presented by the category, either doctors, nurses, paramedics, traditional healers. You can see the numbers for yourself and see this number of these people who just go to take care of patients. And because anybody judged that they are taking care of these infidels, quote unquote, who are a lot Amazonians, that they have the right to murder them. Next, please. And this one here, these are the disabled people who have also been murdered. And each of those D actually is where an incident of a disabled person occurred. And sometimes it's multiple incidences. If you go to next slide, I can show you that you can see the numbers yourself. And we have from speech impaired, pregnant women, infirm, physically disabled, the visually impaired, the mentally disabled. Nobody escapes the Biafra's plunder, the Biafra's genocide, the Biafra's French, atrocious, murderous war that they have unleashed on our people. So not even, being pregnant, in our culture, nobody kills even a pregnant animal. But the Biafra's regime doesn't have a distinction. As long as you are an Amazonian, they think that you are fair game. And from the cradle to the very advanced in age, nobody actually cares about this. They are all fair game, and you are worthy for extermination. Next. In this here are the babies, children under 2 and babies that have been killed. And I want you that the next video is going to be graphic. And I kind of like had to put this to push your consciences so you know that we're not just making up stuff. Baby Mata, for instance, received more bullets than could have killed an elephant. Baby, very, very recently, you found a child whose mother is a pharmacist. The father works here in the United States and actually just going to school, 5 years old. And somebody blew her skull open because they demanded $1 from the mother as bribe. And that is the military. That's what you call a military in the country. Again, my better term for them is human engineered monsters. So these are what they are. So yeah, next one, please. And here is the number of villages that have been burned down across Amazonia. And and if you look back in the next slide, I will show you you can see the figures. So all told, there have been more than 400 villages, with people burned down with people alive. Everybody remembers the graphic, the first victim, an 80-something-year-old grandmother, Mami Api, who was burned down with her body charred. This was the first victim of arson, where a village was set ablaze, and this woman at this age could not run. At that time, the people, La Republique was denying that they were the ones, that their military was, responsible for these cases of arson. And BBC actually did a very forensic, analysis, and actually saw some people, some of the military or some of those human engineered monsters, I should use my own terminology, they actually burned down, they actually had UN beret, peacekeeping beret, one on an antenna. That is, that they had apparently gone out in some places, they had returned from some country, as peacekeeping, in their mission, and as peacekeeping, peacekeepers. And they were the ones that were involved in this atrocities. And, as we say, more recently, Bamenda is the most populated town or city in Amazonia. And more recently, there was out of spite, the military burned down an entire, neighborhood, and with people in there, those that could escape. Even those that were escaped, many of them were shot dead. And there was the case of one pastor. The only reason why they spared him was because he could speak the colonizers' language, and that is, he could speak in French. And somebody said, at least he speaks fluent French, so let him go. Next, please. Here is, in this case, these are the incidences of mass murder. And by mass murder, we're talking about 5 or more people killed, slaughtered. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the real numbers. And here, more than 4,000 people all told have died in this in this mass killings as consequence of these mass killings. As you can see on this on that slide. Next, please. And even as they kill us in our home, our people actually, for lack of where to hide their heads, because they run into the bushes, they chase them into their farms and slaughter them. Some of them got, displaced, and for lack of where to go, out of desperation, they moved into French Cameroon and La Republique du Cameroon. And here you can see what has been done to our people who actually moved there. Either it is the killing, the burning of their homes, the tortures, and so on and so forth. Here is just a catalog of that. And for lack of time, from the interest of time, I will just go through this. You move to the next slide so that people can see them, move to the next slide, please. Yeah, same thing. Next slide. Again, this is just recounting all those incidences. I wanted to finish with this slide to say the depravity and the impunity with which La Republique and the French conduct this war of extermination on our people knows no bounds, to the point where all these people that you see, all these are comrades you see from Siseko Ayokade and the Naira and the rest of the Naira, these people were in Nigeria as refugees. Many of them were living there as refugees, professors in university, and entrepreneurs, and they are all husbands, fathers. These people were abducted by the French and La Republique and whisked away overnight, and locked in the dungeon for many, and currently they are still locked in the dungeon in La Republique. Many of them have undergone so much torture. We actually even doubt how they they have continued to survive. Here represents the spirit of Amazonia. Bia knows he can lock these people up, he can jail them, but he will never jail their brains. Like he knows that no matter what he does, Ambazonia will never retreat, Ambazonia will never surrender. If we will all die, we will all die. We either would, and the motto of one state in the United States, New Hampshire, we will either live free or die. And the international community has got to realize this and realize, as somebody already mentioned, for the interest of time, I don't want to go into thinking about this, but that war that they started on us is going to engulf La République itself, is going to engulf the entire Gulf of Guinea. And people just need to sit up and say to ourselves, if you deny my accession, that the reason why the power structures of the West don't care, if you deny that, then impose just 1/3 or maybe 1/100 of the sanctions that have been imposed on, appropriately so, on Russia for invading a sovereign territory, Ukraine. Take those same measures and impose on La République, and this war would end the very next minute. So to me, I find it kind of hilarious and a monstrous, hypocrisy on the part of the French to be talking about human rights and talking about international order in Ukraine, and at the same time, in the closet, doing exactly the same thing and worse in Ambazonia. Thank you very much. And again, for the interest of time, I will leave it here. And if there were any questions at the end, we can take them.
Thank you very much, Comrade Forlefac. I have just one question to ask, let's say on behalf of the audience, before we check if there are more questions there. Can you explain to the participants how these facts, these figures are obtained, how we obtain these statistics to kind of leave an impression on the level of reliability of these figures?
Yeah, so we have, when this war started, we have a lot of our own people, and for the interest of their security, we cannot divulge a lot of this information. So we have people find out, remember, they are fighting in our villages, in our backyard, in the neighborhoods that we grew up in. And so we know how to obtain all of this information and get a reporting system. So you have to have, and everybody, and this is what we have been calling the international community to do exactly what just you're asking me. If somebody doubt the veracity, can you just send a fact-finding mission to La République? I'm actually telling you, back to Ambazonia, that if you do that, these figures are actually underreported. These are underreported figures. So that we know that. And the problem that you have with a lot of the international community is, oh, somebody has got to come, and then I would have a birth certificate to show that it was XY who died, and blah, blah, and so on and so forth, and that there was no other incident that might have explained their death. But you and me know, in your backyard, how many people are dying from your village. So we find people around. La République can do what they do, thinking we won't hold them accountable, because on the appointed date, all of this information is going to come out. And so again, people call for a fact-finding mission and let them verify these figures, and they will realize that these figures are actually quite underreported. And some of these are actually open source.
Thank you. So a reminder to the participants, if you have a question to ask, please raise your hand so that we can see your hand and call you to ask your question. Otherwise, you can type the question in the chat and we can pick up the question, especially if it concerns the topic that we are discussing. And then to remind again that we are being watched live on SCBC TV, and hi to our, those who are watching and cannot participate actively. Please, we know that you are there, and give this information to others that there are people outside in the world and other parts of our country who are interested in this topic and are putting time to see that we gain lasting solution. Dr. Njibamum, can you see if there is any question? I see there's one hand up.
Let me give this one to Dr. Forlefac. There is one question. Whether are statistics available of victims of the Ambazonian forces? Victims of the Ambazonian forces.
We have some statistics which I did not include in this, and the reason why I would probably take a lot of those statistics with a grain of salt is every young man in Ambazonia, even whether you carry a gun or not, when you're killed, you are actually labeled an Ambazonian fighter. So you got to be very careful with those numbers when you're trying to level the numbers of find out and talk about the number of statistics of Ambazonian fighters. And for rightly so. So we do have some numbers that are confirmed, but I think they're very, very way underreported and or maybe overestimated on the parts of those statistics. So, but I can provide those what we have at some later meeting if that's interest somebody.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Professor Anyangwe's hand is up.
Okay, exactly. Professor Anyangwe, you are muted. Would you please unmute yourself so you can speak?
Yes, thank you very much. No, I just want a little point. I saw there when the area of the Southern Cameroons was given, I saw there 32,383 square kilometers, right? I think that's it's a mistake.
Okay.
It's a mistake. Yeah. The actual figures is around 44,000 square meters of land territory. And then about 3,000 square meters of territorial sea as demarcated by the ICJ in the Bakassi Peninsula case, if you look at it. So that would give roughly, our territory is about 47,000 square kilometers, land and maritime territory. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll correct that. Thank you for that. Correction or pointing that out.
Thank you. That's why we are here, to exchange all of this information and align. So, is there any other hand up? Let me see. So, Professor Anyangwe just spoke. I see there is no other hand up. I would suggest that we have a 5 minutes break, because we have been talking here for close to 2 hours. A 5 minutes break, and when we come back, we will be listening to Professor Lumumba. So we can call it a bio break. And I would appeal and call on our technical team to give us some music to cover the space in the next 5 minutes. And so let's say we should be coming back at let's say I'm sitting here in Germany in 4.
So my phone just the ring go down the empty. That I so should take. People will be running and scattering down the empty. That I so should take. And then I pick up my phone and make a call bar. Number no written now. I pick up my phone and make a call the landlord. The number no written now. I pick up my phone and make a call the neighbors. The number no written down the empty. That I so should take. Could it be? Could it be? Could it be? Could it be? Hey, 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 hey. And then I pick up my phone and make a call the landlord again now. Number no written. And then I pick up my phone, I won't call Nipa again. Number no written. And then I pick up my phone and make a call the neighbors again and again. Number no written. Oh, hey, I'm better at this Sasanga. My brother don't enter Sasanga. I'm better enter Sasanga. You don't enter Sasanga. My brother don't enter Sasanga. Hey, auntie, I didn't mean a bush so. I'm better today here, all men just to look me. They're telling me welcome to the game. Welcome to the game. Shout out the day here. Chop to no day, yeah, all men just the sorry me. They're telling me welcome to the game. And then the lady here wants to collect her menses.
Should be using trolleys.
Sick for yeah, in it to ever get a cure.
We boiling trolleys.
If I'm mortality, the name of the game, take a body of a Charlie. Oh, could it be? Could it be? Could it be? Could it be? Hey, hey, hey. Oh, I'm better at this song. I'm better at this song.
Okay. Thank you very much to the technical team. Thank you very much to the technical team. I hope that the participants are coming back. We will continue in the next 1 minute. So I see Professor Lumumba is there, he's unmuted. He is going to be our next speaker. Maybe I say a few words about Professor Lumumba. He's actually called, let me take the chance to call his name so that everyone should know what this PLO actually stands for. Professor Patrick Lord Otieno Lumumba. So he served as director of the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission and has been the director of Kenya School of Law since 2014. Professor Lumumba has a mastery of national security and fundamental rights, and he is a staunch Pan-Africanist who has delivered powerful speeches about African solutions to African problems, in which he spoke truth to power. We are grateful to have you amongst us today, Professor Lumumba, and he will be talking about the consequences of this war from, let me say, a geopolitical, geostrategic perspective, and advising even beyond that. Professor Lumumba, thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Let me at the very outset thank you for putting together this conversation. I speak having had the advantage of listening to Professor Anyangwe, who has given the history of Ambazonia and the entire history of what we now refer to as Cameroon. I've also had the advantage of listening to Dr. Forlefac, and on the basis of that, my contribution will be very brief and forward-looking rather than being analytical. I think the analysis has been done in an excellent manner by the preceding presentations. Many of you will be familiar with this book written by Adekeye Adebayo, The Curse of Berlin, Africa After the Cold War. If you are not familiar with it, I want you to read it. And I've decided to mention it because I saw somebody posted a question. How do you characterize the conflict in Ambazonia? Because there are different voices. Some characterization is linguistic. And that is one of the things that I find most annoying and irritating, that in post-independence Africa, we are defined as either Anglophone or Francophone. That is something that is very painful. And if you go to Ambazonia and you ask 9 out of 10 people, perhaps it is only 3 who speak the English language, and yet they want to say that you are Anglophone. This is a struggle for dignity of people who have been twice colonized and continue to be colonized. And the question that we ought to be grappling with now, how do we ensure that that colonization is brought to an end? If you listen to Professor Anyangwe carefully, he said that several avenues have been pursued. There has been litigation in African forums. There have been petitions that have been written, and there have been attempts at negotiation. In fact, many of you will be familiar with what is now defined as the Swiss process, a process that is bringing together a few individuals who are drawn from Ambazonia. And my own view at this stage is to ask the fundamental question, a question that has been posed by both Dr. Forlefac and Professor Anyangwe. Going forward, what are the interventions that we can undertake to achieve the following things? One, to ensure that this is not a forgotten struggle for independence. In the year 2020, you remember the African Union had a year for the silencing of the guns. And one assumed that there would be positive action, positive and concerted action on the part of the African Union and ECOWAS to address the Cameroonian question. You and me have seen several meetings of ECOWAS condemning the coup d'etats in Guinea, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and even the change of government in Chad, but mention is never made of the conflict in Ambazonia, which tells you that even within the ECOWAS region, it is a forgotten conflict. In the African arena, it is a conflict that only a few of us outside of Ambazonia mention almost on a weekly basis as a conflict that is causing untold pain to the people in different ways. So the question that I want to pose, and what I want us to wrap our minds about, knowing as I do that the conflict, that the anatomy of the conflict is known, the reason for the conflict is known, the consequences of the conflict are known. What is it going forward that we ought to do in order to ensure that this conflict is brought back to the front pages of newspapers and first item in television and radio broadcasts? Number one. Number two, how can we help the people of Ambazonia, both in ground zero and outside of ground zero, to speak with one voice for the moment, even if they have differences, for the moment, for purposes of telling the outside world that our voice is unanimous, it is one, it is about liberation of Ambazonia. Number three, to ensure that the struggle is sustained at different fronts. Professor Anyangwe has already told us that litigation has been undertaken. And I'm saying that perhaps as number one intervention, we need once again to renew that litigation by putting together a legal team, a team of legal experts drawn from different parts of the continent and serving on a pro bono basis to mount simultaneous cases in different fora, not in the hope that we'll get judgments in our favor to mean Ambazonians, but simply to dramatize from a legal perspective the concerns and the plight of the people of Ambazonia. That is number one intervention. Number two intervention, which has already been undertaken, to begin almost immediately to mean within the next 1 week, a pan-African petition at raising no less than 1 million signatures to bring to the fore the issue of Ambazonia. And once the signatures have been raised, to identify a day on which these signatures will be delivered to the embassies of Cameroon throughout the world in a coordinated way, and to be delivered to ECOWAS, to be delivered to African Union, to be delivered to the United Nations. Number 3, to coordinate all the efforts that are ongoing through negotiation wherever situated, so that there is a single negotiating team outside of Ambazonia, and that the issues are articulated clearly, and that there are no voices which are not in consonance with the agenda that is being pursued at the behest of the people of Ambazonia. I hold the view, knowing as I do that my proposals will be enriched by the contribution of others, that if we do this in a time-sensitive and a time-bound manner, we will then be able to tell the world and to inform the world at once that this is our plight and that our liberation must be undertaken without undue delay. I think this is significant. I think that is one of the ways in which we can do it. And I believe that the organizers and those who have been in the forefront of the struggle for Ambazonia will, on the basis of the proposal that we are making now, then draw an agenda of activities complete with timelines. Of course, there are certain things which will be in the public domain and others which for strategic and tactical reason will not be in the public domain. And just with that, I wish to rest my case, because I know that there is something that is very annoying about the so-called African leaders. It is a conspiracy to support the absurd. One of the things that I thought would have happened during the African football, AFCON, was that there would have been a boycott of the tournament being undertaken in Cameroon. But everybody gleefully was present in Yaoundé and Douala as if nothing was happening. And you can see what has happened in Europe in the last few days when the Russians invaded Ukraine, how the argument that sports can no longer be linked with politics has been debunked, and that the battle must be fought from different fronts without belaboring the issues. I want you to consider the proposals I've made in light of the very comprehensive presentation that have been made by Professor Anyangwe, as enriched by the statistics that have been provided by Dr. Forlefac. And in the petition that I'm talking about, these statistics and the gory pictures that have moved our conscience ought to be displayed there. And once we do that, then we will have started a new and a renewed journey towards the struggle which has cost life and limb in a manner that defies description. Permit me to stop my presentation with that submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Lumumba. You know, one of the things that we have to do at the end of this conference is to note what we have termed resolutions. I have picked out 3 key things from your presentation as advice or recommendation. The first of which is to renew litigation. The second one is the Pan-African action, a petition to raise more than 1 million signatures. And then 3, to coordinate ongoing efforts about negotiation. I see that these are really strong points. I mean, advice that will take us forward. And so I just need to get some kind of confirmation from the rest of the panelists as we take down these points. Do we see it as I see it also, that these are things that we need to be doing moving forward? Just the panelists, just 1 or 2 words from each of you. Professor Anyangwe. You are muted. You are muted.
Yeah. No, I thank Professor Lumumba for this timely reminder. I know this is something that had been mooted before, but I think this is the way for this. It is now time. I know people get a little bit despondent by saying, well, we tried all this, we litigated, and this, but this one here, and I think is added a very important caveat here, that here we are not really going out that there must be victory. Whereas in the other litigation, we're going out for victory. So this one, the victory can fine, but this will not be our motive. This will not be our main objective. So I'm in full support of that. The Pan-African petition and signatures to raise 1 million signatures is a very good initiative. If we can do that, I believe it might going to be a game changer in drawing attention to our cause, but also shaming all these entities that have so far decided to be mute about the case, right? The UN, the ECOWAS, or the African Union, and even the colonizer himself. So I think that's very, very good. For me, these are all 3 tracks which we must pursue. Yeah. The last one about having coordinated, the key thing there is having one negotiation team. I see everybody, Edmund will agree with me, everybody say yes, we need to have that. But the mechanics still remain quite a bit, but the fact that it's difficult doesn't mean that we must not try. So I think we must try to have that common position negotiation team and be inclusive. And if you talk to most ambassadors, that's what they say. They say, we'll go there as one team to have that negotiation. But bringing that team together is often, what everybody knows, it's often a challenge, but we'll keep on trying.
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Forlefac?
No, I completely agree with Professor Anyangwe and Professor Lumumba. You know, one of the good things is in America, we say if you a true definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect different results. And when you do, non-Ambazonians are certainly not. So we know that there are so many things, different things that we can do and that we have not been doing. And, you know, one gets into this kind of situation, sometimes it blinds your thinking. It's just a sheer, you know, the burden of what we are going through sometimes can really make us not really be laser focused. And we need real true friends like Professor Lumumba to really have an external set of eyes to really advise us. And I would just say I saw a post that I was just going to you know, respond by I think the name is Uda Groth, about making, quote unquote, a white man making a proposal for Ambazonians to solve Ambazonia problem. I have to say, everybody who actually gets into this, Ambazonia has so many white friends. So like Africa, I don't think that when we talk about the white power structure, that in any way refers to our white brothers and sisters. I would actually dare to say, haven't lived in this part of the world for this many years. I would dare say that a majority of the people, the white, quote unquote, people, actually don't believe, and they follow some of this doctrine because of the kind of information they're being fed by their government. Their governments are not representative of the way of their true humanity. When you take away that, we all find ourselves as human beings. So I would invite Mr. Udo to really make whatever suggestions he wants to make, in addition to any of the things that he may want to make. And I just wanted to make that very clear. Ambazonians don't actually think about the world as white, black, but the power structures of the white man's driven world civilization makes that. And everybody, it is just a fact. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that Mr. Hendrickx has not yet presented, but to complete this exercise, I would like him to say a word about these 3 proposals that were given by Professor Lumumba, because we will note them down as action to follow after this. Mr. Hendrickx, can you just chip in a word on the proposals or suggestions from Professor Lumumba?
Well, actually, I won't, because I will develop some ideas myself after. So as I have the the duty to speak about putting an end to the war,
yes.
so
We'll
I think
come to you.
It would be easier and easier to everyone to hear my contribution afterwards.
Exactly. All right. So those points are noted. Thank you once more, Professor Lumumba. We would be going to the next presenter, and this is Mr. Hendrickx, who just spoke. His topic is, how do we put an end to the war? You know, there are two things. We have a conflict which is going on, and we know that we need a lasting solution to this problem. But we have the war which is also going on. The challenge is, how can we stop this war? We may be able to stop the war by not having resolved the problem, or we can see it from the perspective that we cannot stop the war without resolving the problem. So Mr. Hendrickx is a theologian, that's what I found out, and a consultant in organizational development. He works for Miserio. Miserio is the German Catholic Bishops Organization for Development Cooperation, where he served as head of office in Jamena, and he's currently the regional manager for Chad, Cameroon, Central African Republic. Thank you, Mr. Hendrickx, for accepting our invitation to talk to us on how we could put an end to this bloody war, and also tell us surely some of the things that Miserio has been doing that we're not aware of. Thank you very much for coming. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. First of all, I want to apologize for my poor English. I hope I won't make too many mistakes. This will be a very humble contribution, you know, putting an end to the war. If I add the solution, I wouldn't be there. I think I've been working in Cameroon for on Cameroon for 10 years, and I lived in Cameroon 3 years as I was working as a consultant for Miserio, and then, as you mentioned, 4 years in Chad, but with very regular visit to Cameroon. And I have many friends and many friends in Cameroon, and I think in every regions, and with very different political views and ideas about the crisis we are talking about this afternoon. So, as I said, I don't have the solution. I don't have the answer to this question, but I would like to do two things with you this afternoon. Maybe to put a look backwards on what we did with several other organizations in Germany over the last 3 years. Many of them are represented here, so I also speak under their control. And then I would say in the second time we can look forward on what we will endeavor to do in the coming months and years. And then, of course, we can discuss about these things and together and see if there are priorities. And there were very good ideas that have been expressed by the other panelists just before me. So I will add some maybe some insights about this. Maybe first of all, I have no legitimacy to speak on Cameroon, as I'm not a Cameroonian myself, out of the fact that I closely work with partners or people living in Cameroon, and that Miserio, my organization, and myself try to draw the voices of these partners in Cameroon. So what I will say is also the results of a constant exchange with our partners in Bamenda, in Kumbo, in Boya, and also in Douala, Yaoundé, and Bafoussam, or even Marwa. So there are a lot of people who are in contact with this and who share their insights on the crisis, on the war. So they have something to say, and that's only in this framework that I am ability to speak about the war in Cameroon. It's not the wisdom of the white man, but only an echo of what I hear and what I observe for many years. As I said, I'm working closely with other German faith-based organization, Bread for the World and the Diocese of Limburg, and others who are represented here. We're hearing today I'm speaking, but they could also be speaking, and I'm sure they wouldn't say something very different to what I'm going to say. So first of all, what we did in Germany over the last 3 years, we met very regularly every 2 weeks to make updates about the situation on the field and to reflect on possible activities, actions in Germany. And I think we did 4 things. First of all, we tried to raise awareness about the conflict, and that's the challenge number 1 for me. Number 1 in the time, but also in the importance, because you know, the crisis in Cameroon was described as the most neglected crisis in the world in the year 2020, and the second most neglected crisis 2021. So there is a huge need of speaking about what's happening, and you mentioned figures and facts and some things who are really shocking, but as a matter of fact, it's not. It's difficult. There's no many place in the mainstream media, and not only internationally. I was amazed, as I was the last time I was in Cameroon due to COVID-19. It was for 2 years, unfortunately. But even in Yaoundé or in Douala, people do not speak about the crisis, and there is not a high level of awareness about what's at stake, or about facts or crimes that have been committed who are unknown, or at least one doesn't speak about it. So what we did in Germany was press release, press statement, interviews, particularly on the occasion of the anniversary of the war every year. And the last we did was in January on the occasion of the AFCON. Just remember that, yeah, not every Cameroonian is as a feast in mind when it's about Africa Cup of Nations, and there is not only in the south but also in the far north many reasons to be yeah, cautious about this event. So that's what we first tried to do, and what we will do further in Germany. I will come to that very soon. The second thing we did was to lobby the German government and the members of the parliaments. So we wrote several letters to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or to other ministries, to members of parliaments. We organized parliamentary breakfasts, and we were invited to parliamentary commissions. The last one was the Commission of Foreign Affairs, and we were able to talk about the situation and to make some recommendation. Or we had three objectives. The first of all was the ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, because it's the life of the people which is at stake, first of all, beyond any political agenda, beyond any political idea or ideology. It's people who are suffering on the ground. And that's, for me, or for us, the first measure to be taken is an immediate ceasefire on the ground. And then what we called for was that Germany could foster a dialogue, a mediation, maybe a high-level delegation from German representative. And as the third recommendation, to foster humanitarian assistance, which is far below what we should expect it. There are huge movement of solidarity all over the world for many crises. There are donor conferences for Yemen or Lake Chad or any region, but not for Cameroon. And the situation on the ground is worsening every year, but very few actors are there to help. And we discussed also two other points I like to mention here. It was the possibility of an independent fact-finding mission on human rights violation. It's something we already mentioned in this round. And also sanctions for perpetrators or people who are fueling the conflict. It's something we have heard about in the last days regarding the crisis in the Ukraine, that the European Union and other entities could raise sanction against people, and could also be a possibility in Cameroon. So, which results did we achieve? As a matter of fact, there were discussions. There were people who were open-minded, were interested in the situation in Cameroon. No doubt that we raised the awareness about the conflict, and in several speeches of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Cameroon was mentioned, which is a direct result of our actions. And then we also saw some evolution in thinking regarding, for instance, the major national dialogue was at the beginning from many actors was regarded as a genuine dialogue, and then we had the opportunity to explain that not every actor was invited and had the possibility to speak. And also at the very beginning, I think the idea that the crisis a Cameroonian problem is, and not so many reflection about human rights violation and the global dimension of the conflict. But that's a point that evolved due to our contacts and lobbying. But at the same time, we had to hear that Germany is sustaining the Swiss mediation, which has not provided many results since the beginning, and very often that Germany would follow the French diplomacy, and or just mention that France at the leadership on the matter on Cameroon. On the Cameroon issue, and that's also something we try to move. We try to push our politicians to have a genuine and proper African foreign policy, but it's still difficult, and we saw that also during the summit between the European Union and the African Union. So the third thing we tried to do was to contact religious leaders and to have kind of action from the faith-based organization or the religion in not only in Cameroon but also from the Holy See or the World Council of Churches, and it was good but also difficult because as we know, it's also difficult to find a common position within the churches or within the church. And I think it's as I mentioned, challenge number one is to raise awareness. Challenge number two is to move the French position, and the third challenge is to have a clear, courageous, and broad commitment from the religious leaders on the crisis. And as a fourth activities we had was to contact other organizations who are working on the UN level in New York or in Geneva. I won't speak a lot about it because I'm not a UN expert, but here the issue was to mount pressure to have the report of the special rapporteur Michel Bachelet published on Cameroon, on a visit in Cameroon, to have because to have the human rights report. And I think that's the challenge number 4 I see, is to put countries like Austria or the UK who are willing to do it, or to do something at least, to put Cameroon on the agenda of the United Nations, which is until now not really what's not possible. And as you know, Cameroon is nowadays member of the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, so it's even more difficult to have results on the UN level. So what we want to do in the coming months, we won't stop, even if it's difficult, even if we don't see many results, and even if the situation on the ground is not really improving. We will keep on raising awareness. It's very difficult at that time because all the awareness is, all the eyes are on Ukraine and Russia, of course, and it's not because the life of white people is has more dignity, but just because we are more involved, and because the bombs could be here tomorrow. And so I think it's just factuality that that at the moment we are looking to a crisis in which we are much more involved. We will keep on doing lobby, and you know, we have a new government in Germany, and we sent a letter in January. We got already an answer, which is diplomatic, but also which brings also hope that things could be other than in the past. We have good contact with the foreign affairs, and we will keep on having these contacts, and really much hope that we could move some things. And we'll organize a parliamentary breakfast in the coming months, and also have a contact with the delegate of the German government for human rights. So that's very, very concrete things we want to do, and where we want to lobby and to speak with those people about possible solutions. We, of course, we are still in contact with religious leaders, and also with, as I mentioned, with the World Council of Churches and with the ODC, and there are also perspectives on that level. And regarding United Nations, the Universal Periodic Review for Cameroon is coming 2 months, and that will be also an occasion to work on the crisis. I would like to end with a quote. It's something that Pope Francis said last Saturday on Ukraine, but I think it's also something that's true for Cameroon. He said, I quote, "The one who makes war forgets humanity. He doesn't look at the concrete life of people, but he puts before this all the partisan interests of power. He entrusts himself to the diabolical and perverse logic of arms, which is farthest from the will of God, and he distances himself from the ordinary people who want peace." End of the quote. There won't be peace without dialogue. There won't be peace without negotiation, at least with moderate people who want peace. And of course, there won't be peace without justice and forgiveness, which is not weakness, but true strength. And the priority, as I said, in our eyes, in the eyes of our partner, is the ceasefire, immediate ceasefire, and any kind of dialogue. And as Pope said, it's not a matter of power. It's a matter of the life of the people, of living together, of finding a way to live with each other, and for the sake of the people, the concrete people who are living on the ground and suffering from the war. So I thank you for your attention, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Hendrickx, for this wonderful contribution. I know that there are many questions that we can ask, and I can see 2 hands already. Let us call on those who have raised their hands to first ask their question. The first is it Mr. Joe Annan? So, is he willing to talk?
It's John, yeah.
Yes, please, you can talk.
Yeah, I'll first of all start with a question to Professor Lumumba. I was wondering if it's possible for him to petition or lobby his parliament to bring up this, to debate this matter in the Kenyan parliament. Then my next question is to Mr. Hendrickx. In his presentation, he said Germany will always stand with France. I'm wondering whether in Germany it's about friendship or the upholding of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. I will suggest we take the second question to Mr. Hendrickx, since he just presented, and then the other one will direct to Professor Lumumba. So, Mr. Hendrickx.
You know, if I learn something that states I've no friend, and it's a pity, but it's like that. And even if we are very eager to foster human rights, we have to admit that our diplomacy, not only the German one, but also the French one, is diplomacy of interest. And there are several interests, and you know, maybe Germany won't speak to or don't want to to come in a struggle with France on Cameroon, and France will let Germany do other things in other countries. So that's basically economical strategic interest, and that's why we have also to evolve in our way of thinking and our way of doing lobbying. We can do it only on the basis of human rights. If you count on that, it's not enough. We have to think about what can be an advantage for France and for Germany and for other countries, that there is peace in Cameroon, and there are other arguments that we can give, because if we only appeal to the humanity and human rights, it's good, and some people are very open to it, but it's not enough to move diplomacy.
Okay, thank you very much. And the question to Professor Lumumba, whether he could lobby in the Kenyan parliament. Is he there? Did we lose him?
Yeah, probably. I don't see him on the. I don't see him on the list.
Yes.
Anymore. Maybe
no problem already. But we have noted the point, because we shall follow up after this to discuss with him and the rest of the panelists on the things that we need to be doing after this conference. So let us take the question from Mr. George Baka Ebetre. His hand is up.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Hendrickx, for your presentation. It was a wonderful presentation, and I think I like it. I have a worry. You made mention of the fact that the both parties have to allow access to unfettered access to human rights violations. And I'm just wondering, between safety and human rights violation, which one comes first? What is war? War itself is something that has to do with human rights violation. Do we first of all try to end the war, or we go into doing findings of who is wrong and who is right? If we want to do findings of who is wrong and who is right, and the war is continuing, how can we ensure that there are no further human rights violations being committed? What is so difficult to end the crisis in southern Cameroons? Is it because we are Blacks? Is it because we are a minority? Is it because President Pobia, who is a dictator, happens to be a Superman? What makes Biya different from other leaders that have been named dictators? Where do we go from here? Is there any solution in sight for the crisis in the southern Cameroons? Where did we go wrong? We, from the beginning, were looked upon like a colony of Germany. Why is Germany silent amidst what is going on in southern Cameroons? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Betre. So these questions, I assume from the way you started, that they are directed to Mr. Hendrickx. So, Mr. Hendrickx, if you are there, you can attempt to respond to the questions at least.
Well, I'm not sure that I really got the point, but I think I wouldn't make such a difference between safety and human rights violation. What we want is peace, and peace is much more than ending the war. Peace is something, is a state, something we have in the heart, and it will be very difficult to build these regions. And I was in Ivory Coast just before the war and just after, and I saw that the people are traumatized. They were traumatized in the Ivory Coast. They are traumatized in northwest and southwest Cameroon, or Ambazonia, if you want to call it so. And that's, I was in Nigeria too, in Jos, for instance, where there are intercommunity violence. It's not war, but it was very violent. And the problem is, it's a cycle of violence, which is always coming back and back. You killed my father when I was a child, and then I rise up, and when I'm grown up, I will kill you in front of your children. And that's something we have to break. It's something that has to be broken, and that's very difficult. It takes a lot of time to heal. And I think that's why we say the first step is a ceasefire, and that there is put an end to the violence. Maybe not restore peace or safety in a full way, but to stop this violence, because this violence has long-lasting consequences.
Okay. So, Mr. Hendrickx, you mentioned as advice, some of the things that we need to be doing, even if we are doing them already. Press releases, interviews, immediate ceasefire should be, considered as a way to stop the war. Then you also mentioned your efforts to get a high-level delegation from Cameroon, or from Germany to Cameroon. How can we, SCA Germany, here in Germany, this association, support you in this your efforts to to bring peace to southern Cameroons?
Well, I think the first point is that we can keep on exchanging information, because it's very interesting what you are doing, and it's interesting what we are doing, and maybe there are some possibility to do things together. Yeah. And then, as I mentioned, to raise awareness, you mentioned a petition would could in Africa raise 1 million people. Of course, it's something that we on which we could lean to buy to the German media and say, oh, there is something happening there. And I think that's at least a way we can exchange on possibility, because to draw the attention of the media on the conflict, and we dislike to do it when there is a drama, of course. Then suddenly there are shootings in a school or something like that. It made react, and even the Secretary of State in Germany wrote on Twitter a reaction on some of these attacks. But we also need to think about a positive way to enlighten the situation, and that could be a possibility, I think.
Okay, thank you. We of SEA Germany will definitely contact Ms. Sirio to work out ways of collaborating in our common efforts to bring peace to the people of Southern Cameroon. Thank you very much.
So, moderator, yes. Can I just make a few points, if I may? Number one, I have to actually just passing a message first from Professor Lumumba. They had a power outage, and so he lost connection to the internet. But I want to comment on a few things Mr. Hendrickx has said. And yes. Number one is, we keep talking about peace, and I just like there's a tale of two wars, as I call it. Again, there is a war in Amazonia, and then there is a war currently going on in Ukraine. And there are two aggressors. You have Russia in Ukraine, and then you have La République in Cameroon. But everybody knows La République is a vassal state of the French. And so whatever La République was the Cameroon would not be able to sustain this war a day longer if the French were to back off their support from La République. And so when we talk about peace, there can really not be any. You have two types of peace. There is the graveyard peace, or what we'll call the negative peace. And to achieve that in both Amazonia and Ukraine, you could just simply ask them to the aggressed, or maybe these two nations who acquiesced to the aggressors. Ukraine can just fold its arm and sit down, and Southern Cameroon, Amazonia could just fold its arm and just say, okay, we accept our slavery. So these are the two things, but none of these things would actually get violent, lasting peace. And exactly would be the reason why would underpin some of the things that Mr. Hendrickx was talking about in Jos, where the people would always grow up angry, upset, and say, you cannot have peace without the first predicate for peace, sustainable peace, is justice. And so this is where I would like to see the Germans really take more front foot in actually advocating for. And that's number one. Number two is the idea there are some direct things that Germany can do. This year alone, there is going to be about 600 and something, roughly 600 and something million euros, pouring into La République to support Biya in his war effort from Europe. There is about 250 million or 250 million euros, or maybe dollar equivalent from the British, by the British, that is going to support Cameroon. That is a press group called Declassified actually brought that to our attention, and that is, it's been confirmed. And then the French have actually they're supplying the same, roughly about the same equivalent amount of money. And then it is actually under the current EU, European Union budget. There is, I believe, roughly about 200 and something million euros actually that is destined for some projects in La Republique. We know these people are going to say, oh, we are sending this money for other projects, but these funds are fungible. If you want to deny, if you doubt it, just look at what happened to COVID money. Any money that is actually going to Cameroon now is actually going to fund the mutilation, the killings, the plunder of Ambazonia and the people of Ambazonia. So if one of the things that Mr. Hendrickx and his organization can really do for us is to call out these people and actually talk to the EU specifically for now to withhold that funding. And lastly, I just find it kind of like maybe again quite funny is not even the word, but I am just trying to get myself check my brain and find the right English word. But to say that France, who is the aggressor, that they are now the ones who actually should be leading the diplomacy, or whom Germany should be leaning on to find a solution to this problem. It's like asking Russia to find a solution for the Ukraine problem, or maybe Belarus and Ukraine had a problem, and then you are asking Russia to be the country to find a solution for those two countries. You know where the allegiance the allegiance of the Russians would lie. So these were the points I just wanted to make, and so that as Mr. Hendrickx, goes towards doing some of the really incredible and work that they're doing, and we're very thankful about it. These are things that we would really want them to really be cognizant of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Forlefac. We have also noted many of these points and his contributions, and we will be following up afterwards also to see how SEA can collaborate with Misirio in their efforts to seek solution to this problem. We had in the last conference, we mentioned the aspect of the German government and of course other governments transferring huge sums of money to the government of Mr. Biya, and we challenge all of these governments to prove to us that some of this money has not been used to fuel the war in Ambazonia. And from the responses we got, there is none. I mean, even the members of parliament who were present during the conference, there is none who could tell us that this money has not been used or will not be used to fuel the war. Now, we have just 14 minutes left, and we would like to respect the time. Very, very important is how we can achieve enhanced action on this matter. And we got some points already which we have noted, and we shall follow up after that. But I see there is one hand which has been up for some time. His name is Bruce Peter. If he has a question to ask, he should ask. But please let us make the questions now short, because as I said, we have only 13 minutes left to close this conference today. Bruce Peter. So, okay, if he is not speaking.
Hello.
Yes, please make it short.
Okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I wanted to ask this question to Professor Anyangwe. It is about this ongoing war in Eastern Europe. I want to know from him what should be the Ambazonia's position with respect to this war, because first, the war has exposed so many things to us. This war is just 1 week old, and we have been going, genocide has been meted on us for plus 5 years now, and we have seen the reaction from the West. It has exposed the hypocrisy, the racism, all sorts of things just within 1 week. I just wanted to know from him what should be how can we orientate this our movement? Because first, Russians, they never colonized us, and they instead accompanied some of our liberators to free us from the shackles of colonization. And if you even look at the root causes of this war, there were agreements before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And if you look, all these things, there is every reason for an objective person to sympathize with the Russians. But I don't know why everybody is not trying to, just taking it as at face value. So I just want him to say something about it.
Okay, I think we got your question. Professor Anyangwe, can you say a few words about it? We're looking at the time. Is he still there? I think he's muted. If you are speaking, Professor Anyangwe, then you are muted. We will not hear you. Okay.
Looks like you have two other hands up. Maybe
yes. No, before the other hands, we have here.
Yes.
Okay. Did you hear the question, Professor Anyangwe?
No. I didn't get the question.
So let's put it in summary that what would be the Amazonian position to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, considering that Russia has not been, let's say, a supporter of colonial politics, and we are seeing all of this going on. Much has been exposed about the way, let's say, the Africans are looked upon and things like that. So what would you advise in a few words as the Amazonian position? That's how I understood this question.
Well, my view is the position we ought to take is a position of principle. As you know, in this business, there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemy. People always say that, Russia doesn't support colonialism, but that is not true. If you ask all the countries that are around Russia, they will tell you a different story, because Russia had to build an empire by grabbing all those territories. Russia did not go overseas. That's true. They didn't go overseas to get. Just like China did not go overseas to get those things, but it doesn't mean that there are less of colonial power, at least during the time of the USSR. So we should look at the position of principle and say, do we support the fact that a country can get up and then just attack another country, either out of what it concerns, it says, my security concerns, or out of ethnicity? That would be very dangerous for Amazonia. The ethnicity question would mean that Nigeria, and in fact, interestingly, that's what Nigeria has been saying, that the ethnic Ibibios that inhabit where? The Bakassi Peninsula, and therefore they're entitled to take the Bakassi Peninsula. They might extend that logic by saying you have ethnic Ejagan people that sit across the border between the Cross River State and Manyu, and then push it up. When you go up to Ndonga, Mantung, Bui, they will tell you that if you look at Taraba State, there are people who sit across the border and so on. And for that reason, they're entitled, if not only to get all of Ambazonia, but at least part of Ambazonia, where they will claim the ethnic people inhabit. French Cameroon do exactly the same thing. They are Sawa people, you know, the Bakore, they themselves say they are Sawa people. If they are Sawa people, as they say, then French Cameroon will lay claim to that. And in fact, if you read the application which French Cameroon filed in the ICJ case, the Bakassi case, that's the argument they were making. So the people who inhabit, then all of those people, they are Sawa people. So we cannot accept that kind of argument, because if we accept it, we'll be self-defeatist. We can't accept it. And for that reason, we must say that, no, I think the Russian position is wrong. And if you look at the map of African countries that voted, there's only one country that supported Russia, and that was Eritrea. And Eritrea had to issue a statement explaining its position, why it voted in favor of Russia. It voted in favor of Russia only because it says it does not support the Western sanctions, because itself, as Eritrea had been a victim of sanctions. That is the explanation he gave. So I don't think if we are asked to articulate an Ambazonian position or take a position of principle, I say no, in this day and age, it is not correct for one country, for whatever reason, for it just to decide that you invade that country. If you decide that, then what of all the talk about negotiation, peace and whatever, are you saying that you cannot negotiate that other country to see how we can? I already have a solution on the Ukrainian situation, and that is you invoke the international law institution of neutralization, which is what kept Switzerland, Austria, and Belgium after the Second World War. So for me, that would be a position of principle we should take. I have looked at it. Supporting Russia, putting us in that big problem, and we cannot in that regard.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Anyangwe. We introduced at the beginning two members of the first panel that we had in this SC Germany conference, and I think they are still there. Is Johannes Stahl there, and also Reverend Dorothee Holzapfel.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, Dorothee, thank you again for participating. We would like to give you the floor to say a few words about the way things have developed from the last conference that we had to this one that we are holding today. What is your impression about the general situation, and what do you think we should be doing that we have not done in the past 1 year to bring, let's say, change in the whole of this issue?
Yes, thank you very much for letting me be part of this conference here. I'm very moved about what Mr. Forlefac, sorry if I'm wrong with the name, what he said about racism, because I'm talking about this conflict for 5 years now among nearly everybody who I'm in contact with, and I'm shocked again and again that nobody is interested at all. If I listen to the news in Germany, to the Tagesschau, when they are talking about human rights violations, for example, in Belarus, if you hear them talking about human rights violations, you can be quite sure that the Western nations are interested in changing the government. So fact is, they do not seem to be interested in changing the government in Cameroon. And that's the point why human rights violations seem to count nothing in this case. So I think we have to spread out and join the Black Lives Matter movement and put the finger in this form of racism that human rights violations do not count in this place. The other point, I think we should spread out to the Friday for Future movement, which is a big movement of many for future groups, because the colonization which is going on in Amazonia, you know, they take the oil, they take the wood, they just want to explore the country. So it's the point to share with the movements which are ongoing now. I feel we are stuck in a very small cloud of people who are interested in Cameroon or in Amazonia, but we have to see it's a problem of racism, it's a problem of colonization, it's a problem of not accepting the people who live there. I also see a problem that in the Amazonia movement, the women are not strong enough, not talking enough, you don't hear them enough. We don't see them in this panel because the women and the children, they are suffering a lot, and we should hear them. We should hear their voices. And at the beginning of this conference, we saw the pictures of the people carrying peace plans. And in my ears, they have been shouting no violence at the beginning. I'm quite sure if the Amazonian movement would abstain from doing violence, they would not have given them in this kind with how it happened, to give the government the chance to say, oh, they are terrorists. And fighting terrorists is a problem. Okay, everybody will agree that terrorists have to be fighted. But if there would be a non-violent, strong movement of non-cooperation, say you do not accept the government of Paul Biya, but I think it would be less suffering if we would stop the violence.
Okay,
in the regions, I know some things are getting a little bit better. School is starting again. And people say about the Amba boys, oh, we are so sick and tired of their nonsense. I heard that. And I heard people who have to give bribe to the Amba boys to be not, yeah, they are pressed for ransom from the Amba boys. So let's put very much effort in the human rights violations and say they are as important as in Russia, as in Belarus, as in China. And if they do not accept that, let's put the finger in the kind of racism that we see here. Yes, thank you very much for now.
Thank you very much, Reverend Dorothy Holtz-Affair. We have come to towards the end. Let me check if Johannes Stahl is still there. You may say a word for 1 minute as the first one of the first members of the panel. Reverend Johannes Stahl. Okay. If he's not there, then we would be ending the contributions as of now. There are points that we have noted, just some key points. Everything has been recorded. We will have to work on all of this. We mentioned, we noted renewed litigation, what Professor Lumumba also proposed, what he proposed, Pan-African petition, coordinating all ongoing efforts about negotiations. And we also noted that most of the points that Mr. Hendrickx mentioned would have to follow up afterwards, and SCA Germany would contact Misirio, looking at all the inputs from Dr. Forlefac as well, to see how we can also support in all of this ongoing work, lobby activities and things like that. There is a contribution from in the chat from Mr. Udo Grotz, where he said they would like to do some work to contact their local member of parliament and see what they could do to contribute towards bringing peace in Amazonia. So we want to acknowledge again all those who are watching us on SCBC. So our viewers have been watching live for more than 3 hours now, at home in Ambazonia and also abroad. Thank you for your patience. The last reminder is that the town hall is starting now. Those who will be participating at the town hall, please don't forget, SCA Germany is a close partner of the town hall, and we encourage everyone to participate today and in the subsequent town hall events. I will be there myself. Once more, thanks to all the participants of this conference, especially all the panelists who really contributed with very brilliant facts and figures that are going to help us in the next things that we have to be doing moving forward. Thanks for giving me the chance to follow up as a moderator. I will call on the chairman of SCA Germany, Dr. Njibamum, to say one last word before we close the conference.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mofo. Thank you very much, panelists, for taking the whole day to be with us here. At least we can acknowledge that if the rest of the world is silent about the case of Southern Cameroons, we are not silent. You have demonstrated that by taking so much time to be with us today to discuss this issue of how we can bring lasting peace to the Southern Cameroons. We really appreciate your efforts very much, and we hope that next time when we send you invitations, you gladly join us and we can continue to look for ways to end this war and bring lasting peace to the people who have been suffering so much for 5 years. So thank you very much. Our time is up, and sorry for the delays at the beginning. There were technical issues. These are beyond our control, but thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. So the conference is ended.